Dr. Aarav Malhotra and his wife, Neha, seemed to have everything: success, wealth, and a picture-perfect life in Canada. But behind closed doors, Aarav was living a dangerous double life that would end in betrayal, disappearance, and a murder that still haunts investigators. In 2017, Dr. Aarav Malhotra, a highly qualified cardiologist from New Delhi, arrived in Vancouver with his wife, Neha, after securing a position at a private medical clinic. The move was the culmination of years of hard work, exams, and careful planning. Their new life appeared flawless from the outside. They settled into a modern waterfront condo with sweeping views of the city skyline, instantly becoming the kind of couple others admired. Aarav's colleagues described him as dedicated and charming, someone who could win over both patients and peers with ease. Neha, warm and sociable, quickly built a network of friends through community events and her growing home-based bakery business. Their social media painted a picture of a perfect marriage. Smiling photos from tropical vacations, elegant dinner parties, and charity fundraisers filled their profiles. Luxury cars gleamed in their parking spot, and friends often commented on how effortlessly the two seemed to have adapted to Canadian life. But behind the curated images, small cracks were forming, cracks no one else noticed. Aarav had begun working unusually late hours, often claiming he needed to cover emergency cases at the clinic. These late nights became more frequent, and when Neha would ask, his explanations were always calm and convincing. Money was never openly discussed, but Aarav's spending habits subtly changed. Designer watches appeared without warning, and expensive weekends away became routine. Neha assumed this was the reward for their years of sacrifice, never suspecting anything darker. Aarav seemed restless, constantly seeking new distractions, and his gaze often drifted when the conversation turned to the future. The life they had worked so hard to build appeared untouched by trouble, yet beneath the polished surface, Aarav was already constructing a second existence, one Neha would never discover until it was far too late. By 2019, Aarav's second life had taken on a physical form, a sleek, one-bedroom apartment in a glass high-rise overlooking downtown. He leased it under a false name, paying in cash to avoid any paper trail. The space was meticulously furnished with modern leather seating, abstract artwork, and a fully stocked bar. It was not meant for solitude. This was where he spent time with a woman he had met through a dating app, someone who believed he was single, recently relocated from Toronto, and consumed by the demands of his medical career. For months, he maintained the deception flawlessly. The apartment became his sanctuary and escape, a place where he could shed the responsibilities of his marriage and curated public image. He would tell Neha he was on call at the hospital, then disappear for hours, sometimes days, without raising suspicion. But this double life came with a cost. Maintaining two households, indulging in expensive gifts for his lover, and funding lavish nights out began draining his accounts. Neha noticed gaps in their joint finances, missing sums that couldn't be explained by regular expenses. When she asked, Aarav brushed it off as clinic-related investments or loan repayments. She wanted to believe him. Meanwhile, his lover began picking up on odd details. He never stayed over on certain nights, avoided introducing her to friends, and kept his phone locked at all times. Unbeknownst to either woman, Aarav's financial strain had driven him to risky behavior. He began playing in high-stakes underground poker games, hoping quick wins would patch the growing hole in his bank balance. Instead, his losses mounted. The apartment that once felt like a hidden luxury was becoming a dangerous liability, tying him to secrets he could no longer afford to keep. On a cold, rainy night in October 2020, Aarav told Neha he had been called in for an emergency surgery at the hospital. It wasn't unusual for him to leave late, and she thought nothing of it as he grabbed his coat and left. But instead of heading toward the clinic, Aarav drove across the city to his secret high-rise apartment. Surveillance cameras in the building's lobby recorded him arriving just before 8 p.m., carrying what looked like a briefcase and an umbrella. For the next few hours, no one saw him leave. Then, just after midnight, the cameras captured him again. But this time, he appeared agitated. His clothes were slightly disheveled, his hair damp as if he had been outside in the rain without cover. Most notably, he was carrying a large, dark duffel bag that looked heavy. He walked briskly to the parking garage, loaded the bag into his SUV, and drove away. That was the last confirmed sighting of Dr. Aarav Malhotra alive. Early the next morning, a hiker found his vehicle abandoned on the edge of a wooded area 2 hours outside Vancouver. The driver's door was wide open, the keys still dangling from the ignition. Inside, the leather seats were wet, and Aarav's phone lay smashed on the passenger floor, the screen shattered into spiderweb cracks. No wallet, no documents, and no sign of the duffel bag were found. The surrounding forest was dense, and the steady rain had washed away most traces of footprints or tire marks. Search teams combed the area for days, but there was no sign of him. It was as though Aarav had simply stepped out of his car and vanished into the dark, wet night, leaving behind more questions than answers. At first, investigators treated Aarav's disappearance as a potential random crime or a voluntary vanishing. But as they dug deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. His bank records showed large cash withdrawals in the months leading up to that October night, sums far beyond normal expenses. The transactions became even more suspicious when they discovered several were made in neighborhoods known for underground gambling and illicit money lending. When detectives searched his office at the clinic, they found no indication of an emergency surgery on the night he vanished. Instead, a paper trail led them to a downtown address that matched the building of his secret apartment. Inside, the unit was abandoned but still immaculate, with clothes in the closet and unopened mail on the counter. A stack of receipts revealed frequent purchases at high-end restaurants, boutique hotels, and jewelry stores. None of these expenses had ever appeared in the couple's joint accounts. Through rental agreements and building security logs, police identified a woman who had been visiting the apartment regularly. When questioned, she was visibly shocked to learn that Aarav was married. She recounted that in the weeks before he disappeared, he had grown increasingly paranoid. He told her, without giving details, that someone was watching him, and he often avoided windows or checked the street before leaving. Further investigation uncovered his mounting gambling debts. Records linked to underground betting operations showed that Aarav had owed tens of thousands of dollars. The amounts were overdue, and sources suggested he had been threatened. The portrait of a respected doctor was unraveling fast. What had begun as a missing persons case was now looking like the convergence of infidelity, financial ruin, and dangerous associations, a combination that rarely ends without violence. 6 months after Aarav's disappearance, spring thaw revealed a grim discovery. 2 hikers exploring a remote trail near a secluded mountain lake noticed something bobbing against the shoreline. At first, they assumed it was an abandoned duffel bag, waterlogged and tangled in reeds. When they dragged it closer, the foul odor and unnatural weight made them step back in alarm. Authorities were called, and the scene quickly transformed into a forensic operation. The duffel bag, faded from months in the water, was sealed with layers of duct tape. Inside, investigators found a body wrapped in thick plastic sheeting, secured with rope. Decomposition had set in, but dental records confirmed the identity: Dr. Aarav Malhotra. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the back of the head, along with ligature marks on his wrists, indicating he had been restrained before he was killed. The lake was far from any main road, accessible only by narrow dirt paths. This suggested his killer had intimate knowledge of the area and had taken deliberate steps to ensure the body would remain hidden. The water's cold temperature had slowed decomposition, preserving crucial forensic details, yet the months-long delay had erased much of the physical evidence from the night of the murder. The discovery reignited media interest, and public speculation surged. The respectable doctor's image was now overshadowed by reports of his double life, gambling debts, and mysterious apartment. Still, the question of who had killed him remained unanswered. Investigators suspected more than one person was involved, given the difficulty of transporting and disposing of the body in such an isolated location. Whoever had committed the murder had been careful, too careful, leaving behind no fingerprints, no fibers, and no clear trail to follow. The investigation shifted into a full-scale homicide inquiry after Aarav's body was found, but leads were scarce. Weeks later, police received an anonymous phone call from someone claiming to have knowledge of the crime. The caller refused to give their name, but pointed detectives toward a man known to work for an underground gambling syndicate. Surveillance footage from months before Aarav's disappearance confirmed that this man had visited the high-rise where Aarav kept his secret apartment. The visit took place late at night, and he was seen leaving less than an hour later, glancing repeatedly over his shoulder as he exited the building. Detectives pieced together a theory. Aarav may have been lured to the apartment that October night under threat, possibly to settle his debt or deliver money he didn't have. The confrontation may have escalated, ending in his death. From there, his body was hidden until it could be transported to the remote lake, chosen for its isolation and lack of surveillance. Just as the case seemed to be gaining traction, the suspect vanished. Border records suggested he may have left Canada under a false identity within days of the anonymous tip. Without him, the investigation hit another dead end. Evidence remained circumstantial, and no charges could be filed. For Neha, the revelations were devastating. The man she had built her life with had been living a lie, and his violent end was tied to choices she never knew he made. She sold their condo, closed her bakery, and quietly returned to India. Publicly, she never spoke of her husband again. The case remains open, with detectives believing there are people who know the full truth but have chosen silence. Aarav's perfect public image had collapsed into a story of deceit, danger, and an ending no one saw coming.